Incidental 61. Remember Incidental 70?
Hey, SpongeBob's back!
This is the tier 7 version of such incidentals. Meet Incidental 61. And no, it's not a baby Mr. Krabs. It also is a male crab though, but it has only 6 legs. It made a couple of appearances in season 1, like in the episode Pickles. Interestingly, the same episode from which Incidental 70 got famous. And he was also in Walking Small, again from season 1. As well, it was a part of the storyboard of the season 2 episode
Christmas who?
where he tried to convince Squidward to come out of the house, but didn't make it to the final episode when it came out. And after those appearances in season 1, it took a little break of just about 20 years to return in season 13 in the episode Upturn Girls a couple of years ago, followed by Say Aww from the same season. He's made a couple of appearances in the books too, both written by Sonia Sander and illustrated by Barry Goldberg in the year 2006. First being Clean Sweep, in which we see him along with Incidental 37A when SpongeBob and Patrick hand him the flyer that reads "Don't litter." Second one, Rocket Wreck, in which we see him in the line wanting to try the rocket ride out. So yeah, that's it. Let me see what else. Along with Incidental 11, 32, 72 and 207, he is one of the 5 regular non-fish incidentals in the show. Just wondering, had he not returned in Upturn Girls, it would have made for a nice theory that Krabby Patty indeed is making use of the crabs, as we could have said that we never got to see that mysterious crab ever again.
He runs over to the floor, he rips up a section of floorboard and says, "I'm delivering the mail to Floorboard Harry."
He, and yeah, it's he, was supposed to be a character in the show, was even a part of the storyboard of an episode but couldn't make it. Not sure if the floorboard is Harry or the actual whatever that's hiding behind the floorboard is Harry, but he kinda reminds me of Mimikyu. Makes you think if the shield is part of the character or not. The episode we're talking about is the one we talked about in Tier 3, the season 3 episode in Graveyard Shift. So who replaced him? Him? No, him? Nosferatu. Yeah, we missed the opportunity to see this guy flickering the lights in place of Nosferatu, which would have looked something like this. Or more specifically, had he made to the actual episode, it would have looked something like this. There are all sorts of fun teased about him, like is he from the random land, or be aware Harry, don't get no splinters, and he's Plankton hiding behind a boat in Krusty Krab to get his hands on the formula, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I agree. He has to be one of the most mysterious Bikini Bottom characters now.
This was going to be the end of the show. We used Nosferatu in the end, but once upon a time, Floorboard Harry was going to be the guy who was flicking the light switch, but we found out that Nosferatu was funnier.
Floorboard Harry. More like Storyboard Harry.
Take a last look, Patrick.
Hashtag save SpongeBob. On one hand, where we have had fans seeing nothing great in the seasons that followed after the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Boomers if you remember. On the other though, it might amaze us to recall that fans actually protested for SpongeBob to not stop. Not only way back in 2004, but much after season 3. About 10 years after what's considered the best SpongeBob era. 2014-ish, when SpongeBob was again supposedly announced to soon be cancelled. This was around the time when the hashtag Save SpongeBob came into picture. But was that all that there was to it? At a glance, it seemed like a straightforward incident, seeing how SpongeBob always took stand for others. Fans decided to take stand for him and raise voice against the unairing of the beloved Sponge, which somehow worked, leading to tentative plans to actually change, and rest is history, I guess. But maybe there is more to the history linked to this hashtag, because looks like the hashtag in question predates many of the events that happened around 2014. Apparently, hashtag Save SpongeBob started from then Twitter as a trend around the time, when there was no such news of SpongeBob being stopped though. But it sure caused confusion and tension amongst the fans, making users think that the meaning of the hashtag is that the show is about to be cancelled. Knowing that there had already been such rumors around for years, and they thought maybe this was it. So this actually was a rumor, but it quickly became an unsubstantiated statement, which grew to the extent that Nick itself had to get it issued that nothing of that sort was on the way to happen. So the protest didn't need to exist. But then the question comes, what was that Twitter hashtag thingy all about, which caused all this in the first place? If the discontinuation of SpongeBob SquarePants wasn't the reason of hashtag Save SpongeBob, what then did it want to indicate? You see, well, it looks like the source of the hashtag possibly took off from Indonesian Twitter, due to a little issue that SpongeBob and a few other Nickelodeon shows faced with Indonesian Broadcasting Commission or KPI, because they found some of the Nick shows a bit too violent for the younger audience, leading to the show's runtime disappearing from the Indonesian TV. This caused the Indonesian Twitter users protesting against this and accusing KPI as well, which probably got this thing going, and the deletion of the show from the Indonesian television was misunderstood as the show's end from Nick itself, as opposed to which the problems were real, just not worldwide, rather for the Indonesian TV specifically. It's theorized that the hashtag probably got viral from the Indonesian Twitter to global Twitter somehow, so just few twists there. But I'm assuming the struggle of the hashtag must have worked, because as far as I could check, SpongeBob has been airing in Indonesia. Either way, Nick is yet to let SpongeBob go, and we still have him here with us. As lights. We've talked about the season 3 band episode Midlife Crustacean more than once already, and here we go again. You see, we weren't quite done with all of the weirdness in the episode. What we're going to talk about now is probably not the reason for its ban, but it just is something. So when a Mr. Krabs dealing with the midlife crisis in the episode is just on its way to work, being a nuisance to the Bikini Bottom with his aging self in all sorts of ways, like spoiling a cool word for his daughter.
Have a coral day, honey!
Coral is definitely out.
Losing his arm to a Boy Scout fish.
Huh?
Don't worry, Pops. We're almost across the street.
Hey, get away from me. I don't need no snot-nosed little... Sorry you had to see that.
Ruining a ball game for some kids.
Hey, mister, could you throw the ball back over here?
Hey, how's about I join you kids?
That's okay. You can keep it.
Etc. Amid that all, he gets accused by a Bikini Bottom citizen for keeping his blinker on. Oh wait, what? Well, this.
Come on. Move it! Could you be any slower? And you've had your blinker on for the last 5 blocks.
This footage is now known by the fans as the Ass Lights incident, and these are now called the Ass Lights. Of course, I guess this is because of a post in the X page, The Art of SpongeBob, which was made in the memory of the creator of the show. Here is what the post says: a painting from the band episode Midlife Crustacean that is named Ass Lights. In case you're wondering, no, this alone wasn't the reason of the ban. As we said, we've talked about it. But in case you skipped through it, this episode probably was banned because of SpongeBob and Patrick making Mr. Krabs steal his own mom's underpants. Yeah, right, moving on. Official in SuperSponge. You know, it's all good fan theories and stuff, all we talked about earlier. It's all fun to think about such fabricated mess, even if they are merely just ideas to give fans a sense of wonder for a moment by imagining a distorted version of the cartoon they love. It's worth it. Obviously, fanfiction exists because the ideas suggested in the fanfiction cannot, because these unreal stories can't possibly be a part of the actual media put out by the actual makers of the series in question. So similarly, SpongeBob fans as well seek comfort and guilty pleasures in these pieces of art put together by like-minded individuals, because of course they can't ever expect such works to be found in some official media put out by the creators, like say in some game or something, right? Well, there in fact is a SpongeBob game, which kinda proves us wrong with this. Because SuperSponge, a 2001 PlayStation and Game Boy Advance game, is famous for many things, like being the first ever SpongeBob video game to be released for multiple systems, first SpongeBob game to feature full motion video, and let me see, yeah, how about being that one SpongeBob game which encapsulated suggestive drawings of SpongeBob, Patrick and Sandy within it? Yeah, so well, after the studio company Climax that developed this game shut down one of its studios in 2008, it was reported in 2016 that all of the company assets were sold on eBay, including tons of development discs that belonged to both released and unreleased projects. Out of all these, there were 2 backup DVD discs of SuperSponge containing the entire library of concept art, design documents, source code and whatnot. All 11 gigabytes worth of content, which immediately got uploaded on the Internet Archive in the November of the same year. This led to a number of little discoveries by the fans who dug it up, like artworks of strange looking characters, 3D models of 2D characters in the game, VHS tapes of the glitches in the game, and fair enough. These discoveries, however, also included things like pictures of people's feet and nipples, also organs that could belong to animals or even humans, God knows. Probably as a reference guide to design the game, so okay. But it's not until the Nick Doodles folder was opened and the users learned that it'll take a lot to unlearn what they found. And they found 3 pictures that were named naughty. 2 that I'll have to censor for sure. Nick Dry, a designer of the company in question, Climax, actually admitted on X that he was the one who made the drawings, and he actually posted the original sketches to his WordPress as well, additionally showing the caption that can't be seen in the game files. A caption that said, "SpongeBob take Patrick up his starfish." Although we can't be sure why he drew them. There are more odd images and offensive things that we could talk about, but regarding the porn found in the game, this is what you're looking at. Fans are not always ready for moments like these when the stuff gets real. It's one thing to enjoy a fan art and completely different to actually find porn while looking through the sprites of the games. Needless to say, it's freaky and makes us wonder if we even need fanfiction anymore.
We've transformed CBS All Access.
Newer seasons not on streaming services. With any celebrated show, you can mostly be sure that as soon as they put anything new out, even if that's not that great, it'll be all over the place, easily available to be watched, saved, shared, especially these days on the online platforms used to stream media. However, that's not quite the case with SpongeBob. Either you'll have to really dig or make a purchase cause somehow it's not available to be streamed on any of the major streaming services. Even with Netflix, although it offers SpongeBob in up to 20 regions, the disappointment remains cause there are at most only 3 seasons of the show available where it's available. Well, we might have the revamping of Viacom CBS streaming service to thank, as it's with the rebranding of CBS All Access into Paramount Plus that introduced their content strategy of the corporation. That has much to offer with regard to
Live sports, breaking news, and a mountain of entertainment.
And perhaps it is due to this merger of
CBS, Nickelodeon, MTV, Comedy Central, BET, and Smithsonian Channel
that everything SpongeBob might eventually end up being exclusively available at Paramount Plus. And this is just the beginning of it.
Looks like Mr. SquarePants understands.
The SpongeBob Incident. This was supposedly an occurring that occurred in Brazil right before the 31st Summer Olympics Games in 2016, when an episode of SpongeBob was aired. Apparently as a broadcast intrusion. Which episode? Don't ask. Some say it was some bootleg SpongeBob-like show, some go with that Red Mist Squidward suicide episode because why not? Anything that nobody is sure about must have been that something that everybody is unsure about, right? But whichever episode it was of this yellow sponge, what's more important is the part where it gets brown. I'm talking about the brown note that supposedly played during the episode. A note which is a supposed musical note with frequency as low as 5 to 9 Hz, which when played causes humans to poop. And that's what happened then. People all over Brazil waiting for the Olympic Games are struck by this wacky cartoon making them shit themselves. It's theorized that since television isn't able to produce the frequency that low, that this thing probably never happened. And however, this story still has valid reasons to exist because the Rio Olympics in question was already much disaster with various things going haywire, reason why they've been named as Apocalyptics. And somehow this SpongeBob poop story fits in and goes well along with all of the other actual things that happened. Like a barely believable and far-fetched rumor fetched by the unbelievable real events. And it's also unbelievable that I'm finally about to finish my very first iceberg. I took a while, but the final day will hopefully be soon. Good day, good night.